kit. There you go.
But this says both are, so you need one.
Yeah. So patients come in along with the carbon monoxide, along with the 100% non-rebreather, they should be given the antidote for the cyanide at the same time. And the last one, which I won't write down here because nobody will be able to see it, but this will also, so the last one is methemoglobin. Which is methyl hemoglobin, or something like that. So we call it methemoglobin. And we see these probably more often than we see some of the other forms of hypoxia, besides for number 1. Of course, we see CO poisoning from burns. You'll see cyanide whether you know they have cyanide or not. And this one, methemoglobin, is a byproduct of anything that is like a nitrate. So nitric oxide, it kind of has anything that has the NITR in it and is a form of nitrate or nitric oxide. So it's a byproduct of nitric oxide, nitroglycerin, like people take for angina, silver nitrate, which is used for burn patients. I feel like there's one I'm missing. And also one that's not the nitrate is lidocaine. So anytime you see any of the words with that NITR in it, that's some kind of nitrate form, which is going to make methemoglobin. The ones I see, the biggest, so lidocaine, you see this sometimes in a bronch. Because you have to have large amounts of lidocaine to make methemoglobin in a way that's going to bother my patient. But what happens with methemoglobin is it alters the hemoglobin so the oxygen can't attach correctly. So this one alters the hemoglobin. So all of a sudden your patient will have cyanosis out of nowhere. Sorry. And they won't necessarily be hypoxemic. Come on, turn down. Oh, cyanosis. So what you give here is methylene blue.
Methylene blue. It says it can also be used to treat cyanide poisoning as well.
Methylene blue?
Yeah.
Oh, I have heard that. You're right.
It's just not preferred because it can make it worse,
Yeah.
hypothetically. Yeah.
So methylene blue is the treatment. So if your patient is getting any of these, you're in a bronch, they've had large amounts of lidocaine, and all of a sudden they're cyanotic, and they have severe pore saturations, it's because they've got too much methemoglobin now, and now they need to stop whatever it is you were giving them and give them methylene blue. Yes?
That's the fix for all methemoglobin?
Yes. Yes.
Is there a test to find out?
No.
You just have to know their history.
I mean, by the time you would even be, if you could test it, by the time you would, your patient would be dead. You just have to know that it's a byproduct of those, and then give them the patient severe. They would get cyanosis for really no other reason, and they're giving one of these, then it's a well-known fact that that's what's going on. Okay, and then any questions on histotoxic? I know that's a lot of different categories on there. The last one for reasons for hypoxia is poor perfusion. So it's sometimes called circulatory. So number 4 would be circulatory. It's also sometimes called hypoperfusion. Hypoxia. This is patients with severe hypotension. Also known as shock. So they're not getting oxygen to the tissues because their blood pressure is so low, you're not pumping blood effectively. What's something we could do? What can we give someone who's got severely low blood pressure? Vasopressors. Pharmacology is going to come back to haunt you. You guys talked about these. No talk about vasopressors? All right. Vasopressors. That's very helpful.
He's full of those.
Cause vasoconstriction, which can in effect increase blood pressure. Doesn't always work, but that's the idea behind them.
Causing more pressure.
And you will need to know these names because if patients are on vasopressors, you cannot wean them from the vent. And you're going to see them on tests and everything. So here, the common ones are dopamine, dobutamine, Levophed, vasopressin. That's an easy one, is a vasopressor. Epinephrine technically is a vasopressor, but it's only used in a code situation. So these are the drugs, the examples of the drugs you'd see your patients on, like in the ICU. When you go in your ICUs, you'll see their pumps in there, and it'll tell you what drugs the patient's on. So if they tell you they're on dopamine, it's because they have severely low blood pressure. It's bad news if your patient's on vasopressors. It means they're not doing well. Yes?
Did you say don't remove them from
The bed.
the vent? Okay.
A patient on vasopressors, it's a contraindication. We'll talk about that later, but they're contraindicated from coming off mechanical ventilation because they're not. So this is where the term hemodynamically stable or unstable comes in. Your patient is hemodynamically unstable if we need to give them vasopressors to help bring their blood pressure up to keep them alive. Yes.
How about atropine?
Atropine doesn't really fall under a vasopressor. It is a anticholinergic, and it helps increase heart rate.
Got it.
So, atropine was also given in the old days for people with secretions. Patients that were dying, they would put atropine in their mouth. They would rub it in there, and it would help with that, like drool and stuff people get when they're at end of life.
What do they use now for that?
I don't know if they still use that or not, but otherwise they just suction the patients.
My friend's son died a month ago with something that really just turned.
There was probably atropine then. So, okay, any questions on this part? Keep it now in the front. Don't put it back in the file box, okay?